He was the charismatic pastor, and she was his faithful wife.
He developed a real nice relationship with this wonderful woman.
Along with their children, they formed a heavenly choir.
They all cared about one another, loved one another, and they all sang together.
But a horrifying discovery shattered this gospel-singing family's perfect harmony.
This story is so unbelievable that people think that this can't be the truth.
There was a shock and horror that such a thing would happen.
When investigators pry open this case, they uncover a crime of unspeakable depravity and the story of one God-fearing family's descent into pure evil.
Is this like a movie or something?
Who does that? How could that happen?
Monday, July 28, 2008. As the sun settles over the city of Mobile, Alabama, a team of police officers enters a nondescript bungalow located at 258 Ryland Street.
It was the homicide unit, an ID unit, our crime scene investigators. I had one other child advocacy detective that was with us.
It's down there to the left.
The officers are investigating a bizarre missing persons case, some 3 years in the making.
Did you say the last door on the left?
It's kind of a shotgun house. All the rooms are kind of off of one main hallway.
At the end of the hallway, there's an unlocked door, but officers can only partially open it.
Something blocking that door. Stinks in here.
It was a freezer. You know, think of a chest freezer. I want to say maybe 3 feet long.
That stinks.
Officers find the freezer has been taped shut.
What do you think? We open it up?
Yeah, open it up.
All right.
Look in it, and it's just a mass that was humped over inside the freezer.
Officers shine a flashlight inside.
I'll never forget looking into the freezer. Everybody was shocked at what we found.
How did this body get here?
In my mind, I'm thinking, oh man, what do we do next?
To answer those questions, investigators will have to dig deep into the personal lives of two of Mobile's most God-fearing residents, Arletha and Anthony Hopkins. Hailing from Wadley, Georgia, Arletha Best grew up in a warm, loving home.
She always wanted to have a big family. She was also a Christian woman, and so she wanted to find someone who had her own faith and beliefs and also loved music.
But by her mid-20s, Arletha found herself divorced and raising 2 young children on her own.
Arletha's first marriage didn't last very long, but she did have 2 daughters by her first husband. But now she's single, she's raising 2 kids, and it's hard. She's struggling.
Then, one Sunday during church, Arletha laid eyes on the man who changed her life forever, a dashing soldier by the name of Anthony Hopkins.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
He was in the military. At some point in Georgia, they met in the church where they went.
Are these your 2 daughters?
They are. Say hello, girls.
Hey, how you doing?
Anthony shared Arletha's love of music and her devotion to God.
To Arletha, this is the perfect man to have as a partner. She finds someone who served his country, who's into God, who's into the church, who's into music.
They developed a relationship. They ended up getting married.
And all the blessings that you put on us, God. Amen. Amen. All right, everybody, dig in.
As Anthony and Arletha's love for each other grew, so did their family. In addition to Arletha's 2 children from a previous relationship, the couple had 5 kids of their own.
She marries Anthony, and she thinks it's great. They expand on their family in addition to her 2 daughters, who become Anthony's stepdaughters. And they have a wonderful family relationship.
But one day, Anthony made a surprise announcement.
God is calling me. I've decided to become an interim preacher.
He decided he was going to pursue a preaching career.
He had a servant heart.
having a military background, and then being called in the ministry.
You have our support.
But instead of enrolling in seminary, Anthony chose a different path.
For the Lord says, have no fear of sudden disaster or the ruin that overtakes the wicked.
He moved with Aletha to Alabama and became an itinerant preacher, standing out on the roadway, preaching to people.
We need to act now. Why would you do that? Why would you not help your neighbor out?
Needless to say, Anthony's approach was hard on the family finances, but Arletha never lost faith in her man.
He's not really making any money to support his family, so times are really tough. But Arletha wants to support him because she thinks and feels that he's doing God's work.
I was thinking that hopefully we could bring you aboard into one of our ministries.
The couple's faith ultimately paid off when Anthony was approached by a pastor who offered him a job and lodging at his church in Jackson, Alabama.
Preaching is my new calling.
He became more popular with his ministry and was able to start making some money doing it.
Anthony's sermons soon became a hot commodity on Lower Alabama's evangelical preaching circuit.
Would preach on the weekends and on Wednesday nights at these different Pentecostal churches in the area. And he was quite popular.
As Anthony's stature in the evangelical community grew, so did his family's.
They settle in a church, and the family forms a gospel group called the Hopkins Ensemble. And they also travel and sing together while Anthony continues to preach.
They go sing in churches, and all the kids played instruments, and very musically oriented, very, very popular group.
And in 2004, Anthony and Arletha were blessed with more good news.
And all of a sudden, 10 years into their marriage, they find out they're pregnant again with their 8th child.
But that's when tragedy struck. One Sunday, a tearful Anthony took to the pulpit at a local church and made a gut-wrenching announcement.
Brothers and sisters, today with great sadness, I have to report to you, Arletha has died.
When she gave birth, they went to Georgia. She died giving birth to that younger son, and he just buried her there in Georgia, where her family was.
But I asked you to pray for our family.
People were absolutely devastated. Arletha had become such a beloved member of the church community.
But the loss of their matriarch wouldn't be the last tragedy to befall the Hopkins family. A series of mysterious events is about to play out that reveals a dark family secret and unleashes a scandal of near-biblical proportions. Traveling minister Anthony Hopkins and his loving wife Arletha are living a blessed life. But shortly after the birth of their 8th child, Anthony makes a shocking announcement. Arletha has passed away.
I ask for your comfort for my young daughters, for our family.
She died in childbirth, and he explains to them that they took her back to Georgia to bury her.
He's stuck with a house full of kids. You have to just pray and keep going.
Anthony is confident that through his faith and the support of his family, he'll survive the loss of his beloved Arletha.
It was a single father raising 8 kids on his own, and you see how talented they were, playing music and singing, and yet he was doing all this by himself, and everybody was amazed by it.
Now, let's get those troops ready. Let's go.
Thankfully, Anthony has help in the form of Arletha's oldest child.
All right, did everybody eat?
His stepdaughter, 16-year-old Chantel.
Formation. Come on, get in the right formation.
The oldest daughter steps into play of mother. She feed the kids. She clothe them. She help them with their schooling. She assumes that mother role.
Fast forward 3 years. It's a brisk morning in the winter of 2008 when one of the Hopkins neighbors notices something strange.
The oldest stepdaughter was out there and had no shoes on.
What are you doing out here?
Well, the neighbor saw her walking down the street and said, "What's wrong?"
Are you okay?
I got in a fight with my dad. It's cold out here.
She took her in.
Tell me what's going on. What's wrong?
At first, the now 19-year-old is hesitant to say what's wrong. But as she becomes more comfortable, Chantel explains she's upset with her father.
This boy that I've been talking to called the house.
Young man had found interest in her, and she was upset because her dad got on the phone and said something to that young man, which drove him away from her.
Those things happen.
The neighbor tells Chantel not to worry. That's when Chantel makes a startling confession.
I'm pregnant.
Oh, Chantel.
What Chantel says next practically floors her neighbor.
It's my stepfather.
This is crazy. This is just like unbelievable. I mean, she's just, no, this couldn't happen. No, this couldn't happen. Anthony Hopkins is a preacher.
Psychologically, there's a whole lot, I think, much she had to go through. And this was a great big burden on her. And she didn't seem like she wanted to tell it all, but she just wanted to get a little something off her chest.
Chantel, we've got to tell somebody.
No.
We've got to go to the police now.
No, we can't tell anybody.
And the daughter was like, well, I was always taught, if I say anything against my mother and my dad, God will curse me.
We can't go against my mother and father. It's a sin.
Okay, baby, we have got to let somebody know this.
You got to tell somebody this story other than me. So they decided to talk to the daughter's pastor.
Chantel's neighbor drives her to the church her family attends when her father isn't preaching. In the pastor's office, Chantel tells her story again. Only this time, she adds another, more horrific twist.
And I know that he has started sexually abusing my sister.
She felt that he was molesting her sister, the next to the oldest daughter, because of the way he would give her a certain look. Because he would give her that same look when he first started molesting her.
But after listening to Chantel, the pastor rejects her story outright.
I've known him for over 15 years. There's a demon working in you.
Is Chantel telling the truth? Or are these accusations a way for a young woman to lash out against her stepfather?
She did not want her dad to be controlling the child like she had been controlled.
But Chantel isn't done telling her story. And what happens next will ultimately lead investigators to the freezer in that house on Ryland Street. And a gruesome discovery, some 3 years in the making. Three years after Arletha Hopkins died during childbirth, the family she left behind seems to be thriving. But in July of 2008, a bizarre string of events calls into question everything people knew about Arletha's husband, Anthony, and their family. It starts when a 19-year-old young woman enters the office of police officer Michael Shavers.
How about you start with your name?
Chantel Hopkins.
When she first came in and sat down, started talking to her, she was crying at first. Tears were coming to her eyes, and she was upset.
Okay, Chantel, you tell me what's happening.
She had been having sex with her father, and that it started when she was younger, probably 11 or 12 years of age. They were inside of a truck driving. He told her the story about Lot and his daughter, that they got him intoxicated and had sex with him, and more or less said, well, it's all right to have sex with your daughter because it's in the Bible.
It's unclear. Did the oldest daughter go to her mom and say, Mom, I'm being abused? Did she conceal it from her mother?
Apparently, Chantel's mother initially refused to believe the abuse was happening until she witnessed it with her own eyes.
Aletha. What are you doing? Aletha, she's upset.
That's my daughter!
They was in this church bathroom, and she just happened to walk in. She saw him feeling on her. They got into this big fight and argument.
Aletha, calm down.
That's my daughter! I saw you touching my
Aletha,
daughter!
no, that's not what you saw.
Anthony vowed he would never touch Chantel again. But Chantel claims it wasn't long before her stepdad broke that vow.
the sex continued even though they were in counseling for it. That it slowed down for a period of time, but it still continued.
Calm down, baby. Calm down.
It's a chilling story. But is it true? Corporal Shavers has his doubts.
This can't be true. It's just too outrageous.
Is she trying to get back at him? Is she trying to get him in trouble? Or is this crazy story really the truth?
In order to determine if Chantel is telling the truth, Corporal Shavers asks her a few more questions, starting with her mother.
We didn't know anything about Arletha other than she had died in 2004. So we're more or less closing up the interview. And I just asked her, I said, well, tell me what happened to your mother.
And she tells him that my mom is dead and her father killed her mom.
He killed her.
Mm-hmm.
When?
About 4 years ago.
Okay. What did he do with the body?
In a freezer in our house.
Okay. Hold on just a second.
The story sounds too bizarre to be true, so Corporal Shavers reaches out to homicide detective Kent Quinney.
Yeah, what's up, Sarge?
This young lady says her mother was killed by her father, and she's in the freezer.
Say that again.
My reaction like, this can't be real. Maybe she's exaggerating a little bit to make her story seem more real, but that's a little far-fetched.
Of course, the story appears to be preposterous. This can't be. The abuse enough is something that would cause the police to be in disbelief, but a murder?
After speaking with Chantel, Detective Quinney does a little digging and quickly finds a more logical explanation for Arletha Hopkins' death.
Yes, Pastor Jones, Detective Quinney.
I talked to several preachers. One of the pastors that I interviewed said that the wife died in Georgia giving birth.
But there is one family friend who claims to have heard a much different account of what happened to Arletha.
She went out to California as a seamstress to work with movie stars or something to that effect.
Why would Pastor Hopkins provide two such wildly different accounts of what happened to his wife? Did Arletha die in childbirth, or has she moved to California? Hoping to get to the bottom of it, Detective Quinney gives Arletha's parents in Georgia a call.
They more or less told us that they had been isolated from Arletha. They had tried to call her, and every time they tried to call her, Anthony would say she can't come to the phone, or she's not here, or something like that.
In each of these calls, Anthony never mentioned Arletha moving away or dying in childbirth.
This family tried for months to reach out to their daughter, to their sister, and couldn't get her. And I think they eventually gave up and just thought she doesn't want anything to do with us.
These varying accounts of what happened to Arletha certainly raised some red flags.
Okay.
In order to get to the bottom of what really happened, Detective Quinney circles back to Chantel and her astonishing claim.
She just made the story up to hype her molestation story. But of course, we got to go over there and check it out anyway.
That afternoon, Detective Quinney and a team of officers head to the Hopkins residence, hoping to speak with the pastor and, if need be, search the house. But not even the most seasoned investigator is prepared for what awaits law enforcement inside the Hopkins home. Police in Mobile, Alabama are investigating startling allegations against Pastor Anthony Hopkins. His 19-year-old stepdaughter Chantel claims the pastor has been sexually assaulting her and that she is now pregnant with his child.
She drops this bombshell. She's making accusations about things that have taken place over the course of several years. And the first question is, if this is true, how did all of this go undetected?
But Chantel's sexual assault claim is trumped by an even more jaw-dropping allegation that Pastor Hopkins murdered his wife, Chantel's mother, Arletha.
He killed her.
Yes.
And has been storing her body in the family freezer for over 3 years.
You don't think of things like this happening in Mobile, Alabama. It's just something you see on TV. It's like a movie or something.
Investigators hope to question the pastor about these allegations. But when they arrive at his house, Pastor Hopkins isn't home. But Chantel lets them in and leads them to a utility room near the back of the house.
It's right down there to the left.
Something blocking that door.
Once you open that door, the freezer sits behind the door. You can't open the door fully. You had a slight stench, not a strong one, but a slight stench. And then the flies start to gather. Thoughts in my mind's like, oh my God, it's real. She's telling the truth.
CSIs cut the tape and slowly open the lid on the freezer.
They had the freezer open, and all you could see was the edge of a hand with two fingers, because the rest was just a big ball and sheets.
They learned that the story that they were being told by the stepdaughter was not, in fact, a story, it was reality.
A forensic team is called in to examine the body, but there's not much they can do until it thaws.
They had to get a hand truck and wheel the freezer out and then take it to the lab and figure out how they were going to take the next step.
As the freezer is transported to the lab, investigators race to find Anthony Hopkins.
At that point, it becomes let's find him, find out where he's at. That becomes our focus.
But finding Pastor Hopkins is easier said than done. According to Chantel, her father had left town to preach earlier that day.
The stepdaughter ended up telling us that the vehicle that he was driving was actually purchased from one of these companies that sell cars that put GPS locators on the vehicles.
Investigators contact the dealership to obtain the vehicle's GPS coordinates. They also run a test to determine if Chantel is telling the truth about her pregnancy.
If she's telling the truth that her father is the father of her child, there's probably truth to the rest of her story, that her mother was killed.
But it will take several days for the results of the paternity test to come back. In the meantime, investigators turn to Chantel to find out just what happened to her mother. Chantel tells them that in December 2004, just weeks after her mom gave birth to the family's 8th child, her parents got into a heated argument.
I know you've been touching Chantel. Yes, you have.
Whatever started that fight that night, it had to do with her daughter and the fact that her daughter was being raped.
I'll call the police. You better not call nobody. Get out of my house. I ain't going nowhere. Get out of my house.
She threw him out of the house and locked all the doors and told him he's not coming back to the house.
I'll be back. Get out. I'll be back. Chantel.
Chantel claims that later that evening, she heard a tapping on her bedroom window.
What are you doing outside?
Anthony Hopkins was knocking on the window. And when she went to the window, he said, let me in my bedroom.
Why didn't you go to the front?
She kicked me out.
Pastor Hopkins convinced Chantel to let him in. But Arletha overheard the exchange.
Chantel, did you let him in?
And she recognizes Anthony's voice. And she bangs on the door, telling him, come out of there, come out of there.
Open up this door.
According to Chantel, another fight ensued.
What are you doing here? Shut up. Shut up. Get in there. You have to leave. I don't have to do nothing.
He pushed Alita's into her room where the kids hear a bunch of arguing and a bunch of knocking around, her screaming for help. Call the police, he's trying to kill me.
Chantel claims she ran into the room to break up the fight.
What are you doing?
She sees Anthony over Alita's head, and her feet was kicking back and forth like she was trying to get air.
All of a sudden, the pleas and the cries are silenced.
Moments later, Chantel's father emerged from the bedroom and asked Chantel to help him do the unthinkable.
Come on. Come help me bury your mama.
They take her then an hour or so north to Jackson, Alabama, and they dig a hole behind one of the churches where he preached.
Chantel says at that point, she and her stepdad rolled her mother into a shallow grave. But a few days later, the pastor started having second thoughts.
Chantel, I'm gonna need your help again. God wants your mother to be with us.
She had obeyed her dad so long and did things that were so unusual until she just followed the pattern. She developed a pattern of obeying him, and that's what she did.
Once they get there, her body had bloated at this time, and it broke the dirt off the ground where she was coming up. So he digs her back up to bring her back to Mobile.
When Anthony and Chantel returned home, Anthony directed Chantel to the utility room and the freezer he had recently purchased.
As the daughter described it, Aretha wasn't a really small woman, and she didn't really fit in this freezer, and Anthony Hopkins actually jumped on her body to make her fit.
This is what God wanted her, okay? It'll be all right. She's home now.
I think this control over the children was exactly what he wanted. And his wife, no doubt, would not accept it. And since she would not accept it, I'm sure she had to go.
But investigators are thrown for a loop when they receive the results of the autopsy report.
Forensic doctor wasn't able to determine what the cause of death was because of the way she was deteriorating when she finally defrosted.
The forensic report is a setback, but it doesn't slow the detectives down for long.
The investigators are moving full speed ahead. They're going to get the results of the paternity test, and then they need to find this pastor because they want to question him.
But bringing Pastor Anthony Hopkins to justice will prove trickier than investigators ever imagined. Pastor Anthony Hopkins and his wife seem to have a picture-perfect, God-fearing family. But that facade comes crashing down in horrific fashion when their daughter Chantel comes forward with a shocking story of incest, rape, and murder.
People are stunned as this story begins to unravel. It's the pastor. It's his wife. It just defies logic in everyone's mind that this family could be holding these secrets buried for so many years.
After finding Arletha's body in a freezer inside the Hopkins utility closet, authorities were now desperately trying to locate Anthony Hopkins.
The oldest daughter advises that they have purchased a car, one of those car lots that keeps a tracking device on it. You know, if you don't make your payment, they're able to shut it off and come and repossess it.
One of the other investigators ended up calling and getting a number to someone that owned that lot, evidently, and they ended up pulling the GPS information up off his home computer.
The GPS traces the vehicle to a church in the rural town of Jackson, Alabama.
We walked into the front door, and what I realized it was a foyer. There was another set of doors that led into the sanctuary. So we were able to look through the doors, and when I first saw him through the doors, he was standing in front of the congregation. He was preaching, of course.
Brothers and sisters, today's our sermon is about forgiveness.
I made entry into the church, and then all of a sudden he stopped preaching, and it got real quiet. And everybody in the church was watching me, and I approached him, and when I asked, was he Anthony Hopkins? He said, yes, I am. Well, immediately I put him down and put cuffs on him.
Sir, what is this?
Place your hands behind your back.
What is this about?
As I was patting him down, he was continuing to ask me, what was this about?
What kind of travesty is this?
The more he asked me, the more frustrated he got. After about the third or fourth time, I said,
Guess he's got something to do with that body in the freezer. Put your hands behind
What are
your
you
back.
talking about? I didn't do anything.
Relax.
I didn't do anything.
Relax.
Let me go. I didn't do anything.
Officers transport Anthony to the Mobile Police Department, where detectives attempt to interview him.
We were going to try to talk to him, but he had already lawyered up at that point in time. He had said that he didn't want to talk.
Anthony's lack of cooperation is problematic for another reason. Despite finding Arletha's body inside a freezer in their home, investigators are having trouble piecing together evidence that fully supports Chantel's story.
They could not prove that this was a murder case because of the state of the body. Too much time has passed away, and there's no proof that Anthony caused any intentional act to cause her death.
Further complicating matters, is the fact that Chantel's sister Tasha contradicts nearly everything about Chantel's story when police take her formal statement.
She's pretty much in denial about everything. And she pretty much denies anything was going on between her and her father at that point in time.
But just when it seems the case can't get any more convoluted, detectives uncover a crucial piece of evidence.
They ended up doing a subsequent search of their bedroom. They found a diary that was written by the second oldest daughter. She wanted a closer relationship with God and wanted to have a better relationship with her father without having sex with him.
That journal tells a different tale, a tale of a person who internalized what was happening to her, was her way of expressing it by putting it in the journal and, of course, corroborating the story of the older daughter about the miserable sexual abuse.
But Tasha's journal isn't the only piece of evidence that bolsters Chantel's statement. The paternity test results are back. They confirm Pastor Anthony Hopkins is the father of Chantel's unborn baby.
There's no denial that they were having sexual relations because the 19-year-old was pregnant at the time, and the DNA results show later that it was Anthony's child.
The Hopkins children are placed in the custody of Child and Family Services, and Pastor Hopkins is placed in county lockup.
He was charged with murder, rape second, sodomy second, and incest.
When we find out this happened in our community, man, it just devastated everybody. Him being in the ministry or so-called being a Christian makes this worse.
On April 6, 2010, Pastor Hopkins' trial begins.
Anthony Hopkins, using his vocation as a pastor, manipulated, planned, and controlled to rape Chantel.
He didn't mind using the Bible and manipulating and mischaracterizing the Bible to even justify his relationship or his raping of his daughter.
In addition to murder his wife.
The prosecutors, they were trying to make him out to be a monster.
As for a motive for these heinous crimes, prosecutors argue this case boils down to one thing: control.
He was their God. He was their provider, and he had total control of all their lives. They were brainwashed. They had no influences outside of what he told them.
According to prosecutors, once Arletha discovered the dark truth about her husband, she threatened to turn him in. In response, Anthony decided to take her life.
Arletha and Anthony had been fighting for quite some time over her daughter. And basically Arletha had walked in and caught Anthony Hopkins molesting her daughter. Perhaps she threatened to go to police. And, he shut her up.
Call the cops, I'm gonna kill you. You ain't going nowhere. You have to go. Get out!
Prosecutors then called the state's medical examiner to the stand. In grim detail, the ME recounts the discovery of Arletha's body.
It appears that it went through several temperature changes or fluctuations potentially. It may have thawed some and then refroze.
Of all of the autopsy photos that I've seen, none of them stand out to me like this one did.
As powerful as it is, the medical examiner's testimony presents the defense with an opportunity.
The body's been frozen for almost 4 years. Is there any signs of blunt trauma?
Not that we found.
Why are you saying it's homicide? What about ligatures where there's, marks like looking of strangulation or something on the neck?
Not that we were able to determine.
I can't rule out that she died of natural causes.
Having scored big in their cross-examination of the ME, the defense takes a gamble and calls Pastor Anthony Hopkins to the stand.
So raise your right hand.
My jaw dropped. In all the murder cases I've covered, I don't think there's another defendant here locally that's taken the stand.
Well, when he took the stand, everybody leaned forwards. They wanted to hear what he had to say. We had a packed courtroom and everybody started listening.
After being sworn in, Pastor Hopkins tells the court how much he loved Arletha.
Wow, Arletha was fantastic. She was my angel. I loved her.
And how his faith allowed him to persevere even after his wife's tragic death.
I would never hurt Arletha.
He's a family man, had kids that love him. There's more to the story than what the DA is saying.
Pastor Hopkins also informs the jury of something most folks didn't know about Arletha: her poor health.
The lady was overweight, had diabetic problems, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, did not take care of her diet, ate a lot of fried foods, and was sedentary a lot in her lifestyle.
Well, what was the cause of her inexplicable death?
It was her health.
According to Pastor Hopkins, health problems claimed Arletha's life in December of 2004.
He left, came back, and she was laying on the floor, and he tried to help her, and she was dead. He doesn't know what caused her to die. He doesn't know if it was a heart attack, blood pressure.
But why the freezer?
God told me that he wanted her near me, and I wanted her near me also. I couldn't stand to be without Arletha. I loved her.
He said that if he had called 911, then the family would have been split apart. He said that for the good of the family, he had to just hide her.
You know you're accused of rape as well.
As for the rape charges, Pastor Hopkins admits to sleeping with his stepdaughter, Chantel. But he tells the jury their relationship didn't begin until Chantel was 16, the legal age of consent in the state of Alabama.
I'm absolutely sure. I never raped anybody.
He described a night that he said she essentially seduced him, is how he said it, happened.
His wife had been dead for 2 to 3 years, and he hadn't been with a woman, and then his daughter walks in there in this chocolate negligee, and his emotions took over.
One thing led to another. She came on to me.
Folks in the court can't decide if the pastor's testimony is heartfelt or just plain disturbing. Either way, it appears to have sown the seeds of reasonable doubt with the jury.
He manipulated this family for so long, he felt that he could manipulate the jury.
But just when it seems the case has tilted in the defense's favor, the state calls a star witness of their own, one who will spell out in no uncertain terms what a monster Pastor Hopkins truly is. After Pastor Anthony Hopkins' gripping turn on the witness stand, it appears the momentum in his murder trial has swung toward the defense. But no sooner has he left the stand than prosecutors call their own surprise witness, Hopkins' stepdaughter, Chantel.
She was very emotional. We had to take breaks for her to gather herself.
Chantel tearfully recounts for the jury the countless sexual assaults she endured at the hands of her stepfather.
It started when I was 11. We would have sexual relations.
Was the relationship with the defendant and yourself consensual?
No. The oldest stepdaughter talked very openly about the relationship, the rape with her father. And she told the jury that this started when she was 11 years old. And she didn't hold back on any of those details.
So, Chantel, shifting gears a little bit, how does this relate to your mother's demise, her murder?
She found out what we were doing. She confronted him.
Her testimony was so emotional that it had members in the jury crying. It just had everybody crying. And even the defense was crying.
It got emotional, yes, it did.
In the end, Chantel's testimony proves to be the deciding factor. On April 9, 2010, the jury finds Pastor Anthony Hopkins guilty of murder, rape, sodomy, incest, and sexual abuse of a minor.
Guilty on all counts.
People were happy that justice was served. These kids could somehow put the pieces of their life back together and try to move on.
The judge sentences the pastor to life in prison, plus 51 years. But even with Pastor Hopkins behind bars, the fallout from his heinous crimes continues to reverberate.
Their mom is gone, their dad's gone. Who will they believe? Will they be able to ever trust anybody? Since these were the closest people that they ever had.
Perhaps the saddest fact of all is that Arletha's longing for a godly man, a soulmate to be with through all eternity, would one day cost her life and ruin countless others.
It defies human comprehension. It defies logic. It defies decency and humanity. And particularly when it comes from a person of God It's just sad, it's stomach turning, and in fact, it's disgusting.
People have to live with the consequences of these crimes, and it reverberates throughout the community. In this particular instance, not only was the immediate family affected, the church family was affected, the community and the neighborhood was affected.
It didn't shake my faith in God, but just the faith in man that God called. Because now in my mind, I'm wondering, are you truly called by God, or is there something you're hiding?
Wilson or Andrew Holden. Both of them were in the thick of it. Jimmy said, tapping Andrew Halden's name on the whiteboard. And Mima was having an affair with Lunsted. Berglund found love letters folded inside the journal. Mima and the Norwegian spy. Tosh grimaced. So, Mima's husband, Jerry, finds out about the affair. Or maybe Andrew Holden finds out Lunsted is getting too close to the truth about the traitor. They kill Lunsted, bury his body on Mima's land, and keep her quiet. For 60 years, Jimmy finished. Until a university team starts digging up the past. It gives Mima a motive to want the dig shut down, but it doesn't explain why someone would kill her now, Tosh argued, unless she was going to talk. Mima was stubborn. Jimmy said, remembering the old woman. If the skull was dug up, she might have decided she didn't want to carry the secret to her grave anymore. Maybe she threatened to tell the truth, to clear Lundsted's name. And someone killed her to stop her. Tosh looked at the list of suspects. Andrew Holden is in a wheelchair. He couldn't hike up to Bresse and shoot her, let alone chase a young girl through a peat bog. No. Jimmy agreed softly, but he has a family, a very loyal, very wealthy family. Who wouldn't want their legacy, their entire empire built on the fact that their patriarch was a traitor and a murderer? Jimmy's phone buzzed. It was a text from Craig McCabe. Ronald Holden is awake, but he's refusing to talk. Get your coat, Tosh, Jimmy said, his eyes narrowing. We're going back to the hospital. It's time we squeeze the Holden family until they crack. Chapter 15, The Bastard She's Been Shagging. The atmosphere in Ronald Halden's hospital room was thicker than the fog rolling off the North Sea. Jackie Holden stood guard by her son's bed like a territorial lioness. Anna, Ronald's wife, sat quietly in the corner, nursing a paper cup of tepid tea. She looked pale and exhausted, her eyes avoiding Jimmy's as he entered the room with Tosh. I told you he needs rest, Inspector. Jackie snapped immediately. And I told you this is a double murder investigation, Mrs. Holden, Jimmy replied, his patience entirely evaporated. Hattie James is dead, stabbed to death on the moors. The news landed like a physical blow in the room. Anna gasped, spilling a few drops of tea onto her jeans. Ronald tried to sit up, groaning in pain, his swollen eye fixing on Jimmy. The lassie from the dig. Ronald wheezed. Christ Almighty. Yes, Jimmy said, walking to the foot of the bed. Someone is cleaning house on Bresse. Ronald. And I need to know why you were beaten half to death near the ferry terminal. Who were you meeting? I told you it was a random mugging, Ronald muttered, looking away. Don't lie to me. Jimmy's voice cracked like a whip. You were targeted. And I don't think it was because people blame you for Mima's death. I think you found out something you shouldn't have. Jimmy turned his gaze slowly to Anna in the corner. She shrank back against the vinyl chair. You see, Ronald, Jimmy continued, pacing the small room. Secrets are like rot in a wooden hole. They spread. They weaken everything. Mima had a secret from the war. But I think there are more recent secrets tearing this family apart. Jimmy stopped and looked directly at Anna. Like where you were the night Mima was killed. Anna's head snapped up. I was in Lerwick. I told you. I went to meet Ronald at the pub. But Ronald said you went home early. Jimmy countered. And Jackie watched the baby. So, where did you go? Anna, because we checked the CCTV at the terminal. You didn't take the ferry back to Bresse until 11:30, 30 minutes after Mima was shot. Jackie rounded on her daughter-in-law. What is he talking about? Anna. Anna burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Leave her alone. Ronald shouted, struggling against the IV lines. Don't you talk to her like that. Jimmy turned back to Ronald. You know, don't you? That's why you got drunk. That's why you missed the ferry. Because you were fighting. Jimmy leaned over the bed, lowering his voice so only Ronald and Jackie could hear the venom in it. You know that if it does turn out that I'm a threat to reveal your affair, it gives you a motive for murder. Jackie gasped, taking a step back as if struck. An affair. Anna. Anna sobbed uncontrollably now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ronnie. Who is it? Jackie demanded, her aristocratic facade crumbling into raw rage. Who is the bastard she's been shagging? Don't say it, Ronald pleaded, closing his eyes, a tear escaping his good eye. Mom, leave it. Tell me, Jackie shrieked. It's Duncan Hunter, Jimmy supplied quietly, confirming his own suspicions that had been simmering since his awkward beer with Duncan. Duncan Hunter has been trying to buy Mima's land for years. He couldn't get Mima to sell, so he got close to the family, close to Anna. He thought maybe he could manipulate things from the inside. Duncan Hunter. Jackie looked physically sick. That slimy, mainland opportunist. Jimmy watched the dynamic carefully. If Duncan and Anna were having an affair, and Mima found out, Mima was a fierce protector of her family's honor, even the extended Holdan branch. Mima found out about the affair, didn't she, Anna? Jimmy asked, his voice softening slightly, though relentless. Anna nodded miserably, wiping her face. She saw us. In Lerwick. Weeks ago. She threatened to tell Ronnie. She said she was going to regret that. And so was the bastard I'd been shagging. She was going to ruin everything. So you went to see her that night? Tosh asked, speaking up for the first time. Yes, Anna cried. I went to beg her not to tell Ronnie. I went to the croft at 10 o'clock, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was a disgrace. I left. I swear to God. I left her alive. I just walked the hills for an hour, crying, before I caught the late ferry back. And Duncan? Jimmy asked. Did Duncan know Mima was going to expose you? Anna hesitated, a fatal second of silence. I told him. Jimmy straightened up. Duncan Hunter, the man who sat in his living room, drinking his beer, making small talk with his daughter Cassie. Ronald had nothing to do with it. Anna sobbed, looking at her broken husband. He found out about the affair that night at the pub. That's why he got drunk. That's why he was wandering the docks. He didn't kill his Annie. Jimmy looked at Ronald. The big man was weeping silently, stripped of his pride. Ronald hadn't been attacked by a vigilante. He had been beaten by someone he confronted. Maybe Duncan himself, or someone Duncan hired to keep Ronald quiet after the affair was exposed. Tosh, Jimmy said, turning on his heel, we need to find Duncan Hunter. Now, Chapter 16, The Galley Burns. By the time Jimmy and Tosh reached the Lerwick Esplanade, night had fully fallen, and the town was transformed into a vision from a chaotic, ancient past. It was up Hellier. The streetlights had been switched off, plunging the town into darkness, only to be violently illuminated by the light of 1,000 burning torches. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a visceral, primal sound that vibrated in the chest. At the center of the procession was the Jarl squad, heavily bearded men dressed in elaborate Viking armor, carrying gleaming axes and shields. They marched beside a magnificent, full-sized replica of a Norse longship, the dragon head at its prow casting long, dancing shadows against the stone buildings. The air was thick with the smell of paraffin and burning pitch. Sparks drifted into the freezing night sky like angry fireflies. How are we supposed to find anyone in this? Tosh yelled over the roar of the crowd, clutching her coat collar tight against her throat. He's on the committee. Jimmy shouted back, scanning the sea of faces illuminated by the fire. He'll be near the galley. They pushed their way through the throngs of tourists and locals. Everyone was drinking, shouting, completely absorbed in the spectacle. It was the perfect place to hide. It was the perfect place to disappear. As they neared the designated burning site, a large walled park near the center of town, the chanting grew louder. The geyser Jarl stood atop the longship, raising his axe. A thunderous cheer erupted. The torchbearers circled the ship, the flames painting their faces in demonic hues of orange and red. Jimmy's eyes darted across the VIP viewing area. There, standing slightly apart from the crowd, wearing a heavy overcoat over an expensive suit, was Duncan Hunter. He was watching the ship with a cold, detached expression. "Duncan!" Jimmy roared, shoving his way past a group of teenagers dressed as penguins. Duncan turned, spotting Jimmy. For a second, a flash of genuine panic crossed his handsome face. Then he turned and bolted into the crowd, moving away from the fire and into the dark, narrow alleyways of Lerwick's old town. "Police! Move!" Jimmy yelled, drawing his baton and sprinting after him. Tosh was right on his heels. The alleys were a labyrinth of wet cobblestones and blind corners. The sound of the festival faded slightly, replaced by the harsh, echoing slap of their boots on the stone. "Duncan, stop!" Jimmy bellowed, turning a corner into a narrow close. He saw Duncan's shadow dart into a doorway at the end of the alley. It was the back entrance to the old fish market, a derelict building waiting to be demolished for luxury flats, Duncan's own project. Jimmy kicked the heavy wooden door open. The inside of the market smelled of centuries of salt, fish guts, and rot. The only light came from the faint ambient glow of the festival fire filtering through the grimy skylights. "It's over, Duncan," Jimmy said, stepping into the cavernous space, his flashlight cutting a stark white beam through the gloom. "Anna told us everything about the affair, about Mima finding out." Silence, then a rustle of movement near the old ice vats. "I didn't kill her, Jimmy," Duncan's voice echoed, sounding hollow and scared. "I swear on Cassie's life, I didn't shoot Mima. You had the motive." Jimmy walked slowly forward, tracking the voice. "She was going to ruin your relationship with Anna, And more importantly, she was never going to sell you that land. But if she died, it went to Joseph. And Joseph is a lot easier to persuade. It's true, I wanted the land. Duncan stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, his hands raised in surrender. His designer coat was stained with dirt. And yes, Anna and it was a mistake. We got careless. Mima saw us. She threatened to tell Ronald. So you went to Bresse to silence her. No, Duncan insisted, his eyes wide. I went to see her. Yes, to offer her money, to buy her silence. But when I got to the croft, she was already dead. Jimmy, the door was blasted open. I panicked. If I was found there with my motive, I'd be locked up forever. So I ran. And Hattie James, Tosh asked, stepping out from behind Jimmy, her own flashlight trained on Duncan. Did you run from her too? Duncan looked genuinely confused. Hattie, the student, what about her? She was murdered this afternoon. On the moors, Jimmy said, watching Duncan's face for any micro-expression of guilt. Duncan staggered back, hitting the pillar. Murdered. Oh my God. No. Jimmy, I've been in Lerwick all day, setting up the festival barriers. I have 50 witnesses who can place me at the Esplanade since noon. Jimmy knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that Duncan was telling the truth. The shock was too raw. Duncan was a sleazy businessman and an adulterer, but he wasn't a cold-blooded killer running through peat bogs with a hunting knife. Who beat up Ronald? Jimmy demanded. Duncan swallowed hard. I did. He came at me at the docks. He was drunk, swinging wildly. He knew about Anna. I hit him with a pipe I found on the ground to defend myself. I left him there. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I'm so sorry. Jimmy lowered his flashlight. The pieces didn't fit. If Duncan didn't kill Mima, and he didn't kill Hattie, then who did? Suddenly, from outside, the night was shattered by a massive, booming explosion of sound. The crowd at the park had thrown their torches into the galley. Through the grimy skylights of the fish market, the sky turned a brilliant, violent orange. The fire had begun. And in that flash of blinding light, Jimmy's mind finally connected the disjointed fragments of the puzzle. Mima Wilson, the skull of Per Lundstedt, the missing journal detailing a traitor, Hattie James murdered with a knife to keep her quiet. It wasn't about the land. It wasn't about the affair. Those were just convenient distractions. It was about the past. Oh, God, Jimmy whispered, the blood running cold in his veins. Sir, Tosh asked, alarmed by the look on his face. The traitor, Jimmy said, his voice barely audible over the roaring fire outside. The one who sold out the Shetland bus. Per Lundstedt found out who it was, and he wrote it in his journal. And Mima knew, Tosh realized, she kept the secret to protect someone. Not someone, Jimmy corrected, turning to run back toward the door. Family. But Andrew Holdan is in a wheelchair, Tosh argued, chasing after him. He couldn't have killed them. No, Jimmy shouted, bursting out into the alleyway, sprinting toward his car. But his grandson could. A grandson who would do anything to protect his family's name and their fortune. A grandson who was a police officer who had access to the crime scene, who knew exactly how to contaminate evidence, and who had a shotgun license. Tosh stopped dead in her tracks. Sandy. Chapter 17, The Sins of the Fathers. The drive to the Wilson house in Lerwick was a blur of adrenaline and dread. Jimmy pushed the engine of his Ford Focus to the limit, weaving dangerously through the festival traffic. Sandy Wilson, the quiet, eager to please detective constable, the boy who had thrown up outside his grandmother's croft. It had been a perfect performance. I told my dad not to come down. I was worried about contamination. Sandy had been alone at the croft for over an hour before Jimmy arrived. He hadn't just discovered the body, he had orchestrated the scene. I used a pen to push the jack. She didn't have anything to steal. He had unplugged the phone so Mima couldn't call for help as she lay dying. And Hattie, Sandy had been off duty today. He had known about the dig, known about the documents had he found. He had gone up there, taken Berglund's knife from the empty tent, and hunted her down in the bog to retrieve the journal that named his great-grandfather as a Nazi collaborator. Jimmy slammed the brakes, skidding to a halt outside Joseph Wilson's neat, terraced house. The front door was ajar. Jimmy drew his baton, signaling for Tosh to take the back. He moved silently up the path, stepping through the open door into the hallway. The house was dark, but a faint light spilled from the living room. Jimmy edged closer. He heard the sound of sobbing. He stepped into the doorway, his baton raised. Joseph Wilson was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, crying silently. On the coffee table in front of him lay a heavy, leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed and brittle. Per Lundstedt's journal. Standing by the window, looking out at the distant glow of the Up-Hellier fire, was Sandy. He was holding his service radio in one hand and a heavy iron poker from the fireplace in the other. He turned as Jimmy entered. His young face was unrecognizable, twisted by grief, desperation, and a terrifying, cold resolve. Sandy, Jimmy said, his voice surprisingly calm, put it down. You figured it out, then, sir? Sandy asked, his voice cracking. He sounded like a frightened child. I knew you would. You're too smart. I know about the journal. Sandy, I know what Andrew Holdan did during the war. Joseph let out a broken wail from the sofa. He sold them out. Jimmy, my grandfather, he sold out the Norwegian boys for German gold to build his fishing fleet. Mima knew. She caught him burying the body. She kept quiet to protect the family name, to protect me. And when the dig started, Sandy continued, his knuckles white around the iron poker. She panicked. She told me she was going to confess. She was going to ruin everything. The whole Dan Empire. Our name. Everyone would know we were the descendants of a traitor. So you shot your own grandmother? Jimmy asked, repulsed. I had to. Sandy screamed, tears streaming down his face. I had to protect us. She was old. She had lived her life. But if that journal got out, the Haldanes would lose everything. They'd take the boats, the money, the respect. And Hattie? Sandy shuddered, closing his eyes. She saw the journal in the tent. She read the names. I didn't want to hurt her, Inspector. I swear. But she ran. I chased her. And I had the knife. I just couldn't let her tell. It's over, Sandy, Jimmy said softly, taking a step forward. You're a police officer. You know how this ends. Put the poker down. Sandy looked at the iron bar in his hand, then out the window at the roaring fire illuminating the Shetland sky. The Viking galley was burning to ash, taking its secrets with it. I wanted to be a good detective, sir, Sandy whispered, a sad, broken smile touching his lips. I really did. He raised the iron poker, not at Jimmy, but swinging it wildly toward his own head. No! Jimmy lunged forward, tackling the young officer to the floor. The poker crashed into the coffee table, splintering the wood. They wrestled on the carpet, Sandy fighting with the manic strength of a doomed man. But Jimmy was older, heavier, and fueled by righteous anger. He pinned Sandy down, wrenching his arms behind his back and snapping the handcuffs shut with a brutal click. Sandy collapsed against the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Joseph Wilson sat on the sofa, frozen in horror, watching his son a murderer twice over being read his rights. Tosh burst through the back door, breathing heavily, assessing the scene in a split second. Call for a transport, Jimmy ordered, hauling Sandy to his feet. He looked at the young man, feeling no triumph, only a profound, crushing sorrow for the island that had bred such dark loyalty. Yes, sir, Tosh said quietly, reaching for her radio. As they walked Sandy out of the house and into the freezing Shetland night, the wind howled off the North Sea, carrying the scent of salt, ancient ice, and the bitter ashes of the burning galley. The secrets of Bressay had finally been unearthed, but the scars they left behind would take generations to heal. End of part 2. The architecture of masks. Prologue, the cost of a coat. The human face is the most elaborate lie ever constructed. We spend our lives curated by expectations, dressing ourselves in the fabrics of our professions, our marriages, and our social standing. But for some, the mask isn't a social necessity, it is the entire self. In the late afternoon light of Orange County, 1979, the sun didn't just shine, it glared. It bounced off the chrome of luxury cars and the glass of medical plazas, promising a version of the American dream that was as sterile as a surgical suite. Inside one of these suites, a man adjusted his stethoscope. He looked like a doctor. He spoke like a doctor. He even smelled of antiseptic and authority. But Gerald Barnbaum knew that if you peel back enough layers of a mask, eventually you find nothing but the cold, hard vacuum of a man who never existed. Chapter 1, The Clinic of Silence. Rick D'Alessandro was a man who believed in the tangible. He believed in blood pressure readings, the steady rhythm of a healthy heart, and the clear, unambiguous data of a lab report. As a physician's assistant, his job was to be the bridge between the patient's suffering and the doctor's wisdom. In 1979, that wisdom supposedly resided in Dr. Gerald Barnes. He was a charming man. Rick would later recall, his voice carrying the weight of a decade's worth of hindsight. A little guy, but he filled a room. He had that bedside manner they don't teach in school, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. The clinic in Orange County was a hive of activity. Dr. Barnes was the director, a position of prestige that he occupied with a natural, almost theatrical grace. He was the doctor's doctor, the man who stayed late, the man who remembered the names of his patients' children. But Rick noticed small things. A hesitation when discussing complex pharmacology. A certain vagueness when the conversation drifted toward the minutiae of medical school rotations. At the time, Rick dismissed it. He's a busy man, he told himself. The administrative burden of being a director is heavy. Then came the morning of December 26th, the day after Christmas. The world was nursing a collective hangover of celebration, and the clinic was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional cough from the waiting room. John Mackenzie walked in, or rather, he shuffled. He was 29 years old, a man in the prime of his life, but he looked like a ghost. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his eyes were sunken, darting around with a frantic, unfocused energy. I'm so thirsty, Rick, John whispered. His voice was raspy, as if his throat were lined with sand. I drink, and it just goes through me. I'm dizzy. The room won't stay still. Rick performed the intake. Extreme weight loss, polyuria, polydipsia, the classic triad. To a trained eye, the red flags were waving violently. He ushered John into the exam room where Dr. Barnes waited. Dizziness, A. The doctor said, his voice a soothing baritone. He patted John on the shoulder. Probably just a touch of vertigo. A little inner ear imbalance. It's been a stressful season. John, we'll get you fixed up. Rick watched as Barnes scribbled a prescription for an anti-vertigo medication. No immediate finger stick for blood sugar. No urgent hospitalization. Just a slip of paper and a see you next week. Doctor, shouldn't we? Rick started. We've ordered the blood tests. Rick, Barnes interrupted, flashing a bright, practiced smile. The lab will have them by tomorrow. Let the man go home and rest. It's the holidays. John Mackenzie left the clinic clutching a prescription that was effectively a death warrant. He walked out into the California sun, his body screaming for insulin, his blood turning into a thick, syrupy poison. Chapter 2. The weight of 1,200. The next day, the clinic felt different. The air was heavy. Dr. Barnes had the day off a reward for his hard work during the holiday rush. The lab results arrived in a manila envelope. Rick opened it, his heart skipping a beat as he scanned the numbers. He looked for the glucose line. He expected to see a high number, perhaps 200 or 300. The number on the page was 1,200. In the medical world, a blood sugar of 1,200 isn't just a high reading. It is an emergency of the highest order. It is the threshold of a diabetic coma. It is the body's internal systems failing in real time. My God, Rick whispered. He didn't wait. He didn't call the director. He grabbed the phone and started dialing. He called John's home, no answer. He called John's ex-wife. His emergency contacts, nothing. A cold dread began to pool in Rick's stomach. I need a wellness check for John Mackenzie, Rick told the dispatcher at the Garden Grove Police Department. This is a medical emergency. He could be dead or dying. The police arrived at John's apartment an hour later. The silence behind the door was absolute. When they kicked it in, they found him in the kitchen. He was lying on the linoleum, his hand outstretched toward a glass of water he never reached. In his other hand was the prescription for the vertigo pills, the useless scraps of paper given to him by a man of science. John Mackenzie was dead. He was 29 years old. He left behind a 4-year-old daughter named Jill, who would spend the rest of her life wondering why her father never came home from the doctor. Chapter 3, The Actors Resume. Grief is a powerful catalyst. For Rick D'Alessandro, the grief for John Mackenzie quickly curdled into a sharp, piercing suspicion. How could a medical director miss a 1,200 blood sugar? How could a man with a medical degree treat a dying diabetic with vertigo pills? Rick sat in his office, the clinic now feeling like a house of mirrors. He picked up the phone and called the medical board in Sacramento. I'd like to verify the credentials of Dr. Gerald Barnes, he said. One moment, the clerk replied. We have a Gerald Barnes, orthopedic surgeon, practicing in Stockton. Stockton. Rick frowned. That's 400 miles away. This Dr. Barnes is a GP in Orange County. Would you like us to fax his identification photo? When the fax machine began to work and spit out the grainy image, Rick felt the world tilt. The man in the photo was older, with different features, a different jawline. It was a face he had never seen in his life. The man he had been working for, the man who had just treated John Mackenzie, was not Gerald Barnes. The investigation that followed unraveled a lie of staggering proportions. The man at the clinic was actually Gerald Barnbaum, a former pharmacist from Chicago. Barnbaum wasn't a doctor. He was a failed actor and a convicted fraudster who had been caught in a Medicaid scam years earlier, when his pharmacy license was revoked. Barnbaum didn't reflect or repent. He simply decided to play a bigger role. He moved to California, changed a few letters of his name, and borrowed the identity of a real doctor. He had called the medical board, claimed he lost his license, and they, without a single background check, sent him a duplicate. He had spent years seeing 30 to 40